Greetings, Kerbonauts. This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 4 of Operation Goldstrike. The mission for today is to launch and dock a very large module for the space station that is going to be going to Minmus. Our liftoff mass for today is a little over 386 tons, and the thrust is just over 5,600 kilonewtons at sea level. The total length is about 52 meters from the bottom of the engines to the top of the fairing, although the fairing itself takes up about 25 meters of the entire length. The payload takes up just about every centimeter of that fairing, so you can figure that the payload itself is just about 25 meters long. This module will serve as pretty much the core of what the station is all about. It's going to have some ore storage areas, a refinery, a docking hub for other things to connect to, as well as the main computer, the main batteries, the gyroscopes, and the primary source of power with lots of solar panels. And yes, you heard right, I said we have our ore refinery on the space station. So let me give you the general overview of how this whole operation is going to work. In the previous episodes, you've already seen that we have scanned Minmus, gone down to the surface and scanned the biome and then found a landing site, landed our drilling and refueling station, and now we're doing the station. So if the drills are down on the surface and the refinery is up in orbit, then we will have to carry the ore back and forth from the ground to orbit. Now, why not just put the refinery down on the surface with the drills, convert it into fuel, and then carry the fuel back up? Well, for one thing, I think this is more fun this way. But if you need an extra reason beyond it's just more fun, how about that ore is twice as dense as fuel, which means you can pack more potential energy in 1 cubic meter of ore than you can in a cubic meter of fuel storage. You would need twice as many fuel tanks to carry the same quantity of overall fuel as if you carried the ore. That means the craft will be smaller and it'll be more maneuverable. It won't take any less delta V, but it also won't take any more. Also, if the refueling is done at the station, then that's where they're going to be draining out certain amounts of one type of fuel or another, and so that's the location where you're going to know what you need to convert the ore into in order to replenish whatever it is that you're taking out. So let's say, for example, you dock something and it needs to refuel its monopropellant. Well, then you can convert the ore right there into new monopropellant to replace what has been just taken away. So in a nutshell, it's more compact, and it's easier to respond to the changes in your program and the demands of your spaceships as you go along. Our refining module has just about intercepted with the rest of the station, and there we go, we have our close approach now. You'll notice that I went into a much higher orbit than the current station with the crew transfer vehicle docked to it. My reason for that was I wanted to have a little extra maneuvering room because this thing is really long, really heavy, and I wasn't sure how maneuverable it would be, and I'm used to how much more difficult things are to maneuver in Projects Odyssey and Alexandria. Well, as it turns out, the realism that I'm doing in those other series is making all of this going back to stock feel really, really simple. So I didn't really need to go up like that. I probably could have just gone into a straight direct rendezvous after all. But I didn't know that until I had already done this and found out that this thing really is very maneuverable. Well, we have our close approach, but I would like to improve the inclination and the relative velocity that we'll have at the destination by making a maneuver here at the ascending node to push the close approach a little bit further away from where we are. After that, I'm going to make another maneuver because you notice that we're on the dark side of the planet right now. I don't want to do my docking in the dark, so I'd like to adjust us to where the next close approach after that is on the far side in the sun. And so that's what we're setting up right there. Also, that second maneuver we just did has more closely matched our orbit to the target orbit, and so once again, the relative velocity will have been reduced by just a bit. So now all that's left is turning on the RCS and using that to rotate us into the proper orientation for that next burn. And right there you can see just how easy it was to maneuver us. And while we're here high warping off to the next maneuver node, I think this could be a good opportunity for us to go down into the VAB and take a look at this before you see some of what it's like up here in orbit. That way when we get it here and I'm doing things like activating stuff by action group, you'll understand what I just did because I'll have explained it. So let's go take a look at that. Alright, down here at the bottom, we were powering this with another one of those Mammoth engines, although this time I reduced the Mammoth engine down with the thrust limiter to make sure that I had the proper second stage thrust to weight ratio that was going to go in between the initial decoupling of about 1.3 up to its totally drained of fuel 2.3. It was the 2.3 that I was targeting in that case. By dragging this up, you can see what would happen is we'd have been almost at 4 Gs, 2.6 Gs right at the decoupling of the side boosters. And I didn't want the maximum thrust to weight to be quite that high, so I dragged this down until it was around 2.5. After that, I went to the kickback solid boosters on the sides and reduced those until I had the 1.6 to 1.7 that I usually go for, since that makes it maneuverable enough to do my gravity turn properly. So we can see over here on the side that we activate all that together, but then once they're drained, I release 3 of them in one shot, and then the other 3 with a second group. That way things are less likely to collide with each other, and less likely for these boosters to be causing damage to anything on the other side. These little retros here that I'm talking about. Scrolling our way up, you can see we have the standard retros there to decouple the stage here. Now I did a thing here on this one, where underneath this engine, we have some beams that I used in order to attach RCS and monopropellant. I did that because the further away that you put the RCS from the center of mass, the easier it is to maneuver it. You're essentially creating a longer lever. You can see right here that I've got the little decouplers like I've shown in the other episode where I put those there so they come up here, and then those go up the side where I can use those to do some struts to connect up here and prevent it from wiggling around too much. I stopped it right there because I didn't think that this part would have any meaningful mass and make it wiggle. So down here we will pull this section away, and this is the core module. It is going to go up there, and one of these 4 in the middle is going to dock on to the rest of the station that we already have there. Down here at the bottom, this is where our refueling ore carrier will come. It'll dock here and transfer the ore into these 3 holding tanks, which can then drain that up into the refinery right here, which would then be pumping it up over into a module that we haven't got launched yet. But that'll be the fuel storage tank over there. The rest of the base is going to be over there, and then we have another module that has not been launched yet, which will go over here. This location right here is where visiting crew craft would be able to come and dock up. On the sides of this, I have some solar panels that are going to act as radiators. Since KSP doesn't have radiators yet, those are going to serve as my radiators for now, cooling down the refinery when it gets too hot. Up in here, you can see we have a service bay, and inside that service bay, we have our CPU down in there and gyroscopes and batteries. Then above there, we have some monopropellant for the RCS that we have up there and down there. That'll be how we maneuver it into position and dock it to the rest of the station. And then up here, even though I don't really need it, I have a narrowband scanner just for the fun of it. 3 solar panels down each side, so 6 total, providing plenty of power for the entire station later, whether that refinery is going or not. All along the outside, you can see we've had some handrails here and there so that if we need to, we can go out on an EVA and grab onto those and hold on for whatever purpose. And just because it's cool, we've got some extra communications here and there. And on the outside, of course, there are more lights. Look at that, lights right there, and lights right there, lights right there, lights right there, lights right there. Now, how are we doing out here at orbit? What were we up to? Oh yes, we have a maneuver node set at the location of the close approach. This time we will pay much more attention as we're coming in, and hopefully we will not have the station overshoot us at super high velocity like before. We have repositioned ourselves to be pointed at that maneuver, and now with about maybe 10 to 20% thrust, we'll slow ourselves down a little bit at a time. We've still got that stage on there because the RCS isn't going to move us really fast. A fraction of a meter per second of acceleration if we were to try and maneuver like that, and I don't even know if I have enough monopropellant on there to do all of my maneuvers by RCS anyway. We will wait until we're really close to the station before we decouple the stage with the big engine. At the moment, I am maneuvering by flight computer, looking at the close approach distance and seeing if we're getting closer, then that's a good way to press RCS, and further away is a bad way. It's pretty simple like that. And now we will decouple those rails, whoosh, off they go. Those things get fired out of there like rockets. Alright, I have right-clicked on the docking node that was down there on that stage, told it to decouple, or I guess technically undock, then select the closest docking node to me as the place we're going to be controlling from, and a docking node over on the station, the one that we're going to connect up this to. Tell that it wants to be the target, not actually paying any attention yet to whether or not I have selected the proper source docking node so that the solar panels will line up, and I will lament that failure, that oversight, in just a few minutes. But for now, we are going to ease our way in using the mono and RCS that we have on this. It's extremely maneuverable, especially because it has those gyroscopes in there. I planned it out that way. I knew that it would be easier to maneuver this one than to try to go over to the one with the crew on it and try to maneuver from there. I've sort of planned out the entire station down in the VAB, and now we're bringing up the modules to it. So I know that I want the ore tanks going down off the bottom where that antenna is. And I also know I want the solar panels to be pointing sideways, but I accidentally docked it there where one solar panel would have bumped into that antenna down below. So we have to undock, rotate it 90 degrees, and then redock it back up. I knew this was how I wanted it, and for some reason I thought that that was how I was flying in, and I didn't notice that I had it crooked until we got there the first time. Now we are opening all the solars one by hand, because I also set up the action group on those to be on the 1 key, but the crew transfer craft has the 1 key set up to tell it to undock itself from the station. That was set up that way to release the tower after we had made it into orbit. So now I can't press 1 to open the solar, so I have to do it by hand. It's okay, I like clicking on things, it can be fun sometimes. Next up, I would like to send all 3 remaining sections of my station in one launch, but it probably would have been a smarter idea to move the launch clamps down into the section with the engines and the boosters so that they would have released. Well, chances are I probably have more Delta V on this craft than I need, so let's just go for it anyway, shift those down, and activate a new action group that I'll create here on the fly by hand. Surely that will be the only thing that's going to go wrong with this launch, right? Well, we'll jump ahead here a second to where I first started noticing that some of my solids were draining faster than the others, and then it occurred to me I had lowered the thrust in 3 of them, but I have them set in 2 groups of 3, symmetry 3, and then a separate group symmetry 3, not 6. I did that to make it easier for the decoupling, doing in 2 groups of 3, but that means if I changed the amount of solid fuel or the thrust, I have to do it in each group separately, and I didn't do that, and so now they're draining at different rates. Which should be okay as long as when I go to decouple, I have the decouplers in the right order. I wasn't sure if they were in the right order, and the decoupling point was coming up real soon, so I decided to just let them both run out, both sets, before I decoupled any of them. That way I wouldn't have to worry about it. Okay, so that's going to be the last problem we have, right? Because if it is, so far, nothing really bad has happened. We can still make it to orbit with this. I didn't do any simulations. I just went straight into the launch thinking that my launcher would be the same as the one I used the last time, and so nothing would go wrong with it. Other than, of course, how I had modified the thrust, which we just discussed. But despite having used this before, when I went to decouple the lower stage after it completely drained, for some reason that I didn't know right at the time it was happening, the decoupler fell away, but the engine stayed stuck to the lower stage. And I went down into the VAB and I checked it, and it was not a thing where I had accidentally attached the engine to that lower stage. It just got stuck when I went to do the decouple. I even experimented with it. I took it out on the pad with just a decoupler attached, put myself into low gravity, activated the decoupler, activated the next engine, and it was able to lift off out of it just fine. But if I then attached a fuel tank under the decoupler, went back out to the pad with no other changes, activated the decoupler again, activated the engine, well, the decoupler would fall away, but the engine was staying stuck to the lower tank. I checked the debug console to see what was going on, and there were a whole bunch of spammy errors that led me on a wild goose chase. Turned out they had nothing to do with the problem as far as I can tell, because I took out that mod and I was still having the issue with the tank. I fiddled with it for probably a good hour before I decided that maybe it was related to trying to attach surface-mounted lights to the decoupler itself. That seemed to be activating some sort of a bug and breaking it, but if I took those lights out, then it was okay. So I moved those lights down to the fuel tank and went for a second launch, which is what we're watching now. I went down into the VAB on that last revert and fixed where the launch clamps were, so they were in the first stage, and it also occurred to me that rather than fixing the solids, to have the same thrust in all three of them, that if I did it where one set drained earlier than the others, I could decouple that set as long as I have them in the right decoupler order. So I set it up like that, thinking that I had them in the right decoupler order, leaving the amount of thrust alone. Then we got up here and decoupled them, and oops, oh dear. Yeah, I didn't put them in the right order after all. Fortunately, the little retros on the sides pushed them away so they didn't hit anything as they were coming off. And the other set had already drained, so we just got rid of those right away. Alright, so next, I wanted something to challenge myself, and so I decided that for my challenge, I was going to try to rendezvous with my space station without ever looking at the map view. I had looked at the map back before I hit spacebar for the very first stage to launch, but since that point I have not looked back at the map. And I'm showing you this entire next segment completely uncut, which is why it's going at 16 times normal speed, just to skip past all this stuff. And eventually I am going to go out to the map once I believe that I have intercepted, and we'll see how well I have done. And then we will know whether or not I have lived up to the challenge I set for myself, a rendezvous from the ground straight to the station without ever looking. So I've cut the engines because I think I'm there. We go out to the map, look over, and on the left-hand side, the purple indicators, 600, less than 600 meters away. That's the ticket. So now we will set up a maneuver at that location, one that will allow me to match velocities with my target once we get there, and just warp ahead to that location now. I just realized I must have forgotten to decouple the fairings somewhere along the line. I should have done that already, but well, whatever. It's non-persistent debris. We'll just get rid of it now and flip ourselves over to the proper maneuver node so that we can match our velocities with our target station. You can see the three sections of our new modules there. They're all stacked on top of each other for the moment. We'll break it apart once we get to the station. One will go on one side and two will go on the other. We have an empty fuel tank that we'll be using later. Once we have ore on the station, we'll transform that ore into fuel and oxidizer and send that into the big orange tank. We also have some living quarters and the airlock that we were talking about earlier. And on the outside of the airlock is our external science platform. Just like how on the ISS they have these external racks where experiments that need to be done in space can go, we have the same thing on the outside of our station. And just like the earlier large payloads, we have rails that go up and down each side, which I've used to strut it all together and make sure that it doesn't wiggle during the liftoff. And while doing burns like the one we'll be doing here in order to match velocities. And whoosh, away go the rails when I hit the stage to decouple them. We'll also decouple from the final stage that got us here. We'll maneuver the rest of the way just on mono and RCS jets. Tell it that we want to control from here, from that bottom side docking port, because we're going to attach the fuel tank first. After that, we can decouple the two modules that are on top of the fuel tank. I have independently balanced all the different sections. First, I did the balancing on the section that was going to be separating from the fuel tank, and then I redid the balance with the fuel tank attached, and that meant putting extra RCS jets down on the bottom of it so that I could have both sections be in balance. It doesn't really matter which way I roll this one. It's only the module that I'm going to decouple and dock second that matters which way it's rolled, but nonetheless, I've given this one a little bit of a roll to put the monopropellant tanks going on the up and down on the Z-axis, and I did that for no other reason than I thought it looked cooler than if I were to have put them on the side, the horizontal axis. So now that we have that piece docked up, it's time to take the next 2 modules and move them to the other side. However, we're going to decouple the 3rd module first because I want to get that one out, rotate it around to the proper direction, and then redock it to my cupola. Then, after the cupola is attached in the right location, we're going to decouple the cupola from the big orange tank, and we'll take these 2 together over to the other side and dock them over there. It took a few seconds for me to get my orientation right. I was trying to do a couple moves at the same time, and then I thought, well, it's probably going to be much easier if I just go in one axis at a time, rotating. So we did one rotation, and then we stopped, and then we did one roll, and then we stopped, and then we did one pitch maneuver, and then it became much easier to get it into the orientation that I wanted, to get it to the other docking nodes. And I followed that up by doing the exact same thing again to bring it all the way over to the other side of the station. Very carefully lining up one axis at a time until we were in the right spot, and then eased our way back into that other side's docking node. And with that, we have one more thing to do before we can transfer this over to Minmus. The crew transfer vehicle is sticking out on the side, and so if we were applying thrust with the back engines there, the core module of our new station, it might be unstable with the center of mass and the center of thrust all offset. So we'll move the crew transfer vehicle over to the front side, the docking port where it should have been anyway. It's just we didn't have that module up there at the very beginning when we first came up. And then in the next episode, we'll be able to make that transfer over to Minmus and start using the station. So until then, I will see you later, Kerbonauts.